You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I'm joined, as always, by your co-host, Kevin. How we doing tonight, Kevin? Yes, sir.
Doing good, buddy. Doing good. Nuggets just won their first game of the Western Conference Finals. Hockey has been very entertaining. Very good hockey series. We got some rookies signing contracts, which is a good thing. What else we got going on? Rookie drafts, startup drafts. Yeah, there's a lot of random things, right? And plus more team breakdowns. So things are good, man. Things are really good. How are you?
Doing really well, right? Like we cannot complain. We are fully into team breakdowns here and really starting to get going on all of that. The Nuggets winning in a very strange kind of game, right? Like the Joker looked like a man playing amongst boys type of thing tonight. But it was a very strange win where they absolutely just came out dominating, and then all of a sudden just kind of let the Lakers creep back into that fourth quarter there a little bit. So hopefully not a sign of things to come. We just see more just dominant Nuggies basketball here to close out, and they reach the first ever NBA Finals.
Yeah, that'd be good. Good for the city, good for the franchise.
Yeah. So that's what I'm hoping for and rooting for here. Dynasty drafts definitely underway. Rookies going on. We've got a few startups that were taking place in here as well. Right now we got that Dynasty Best Ball League that we're kind of smooching our way on through there a little bit, but it's kind of been a slow go the last week or so on that one.
Yeah, it has been a little slow, but I do like my team. Like I'm happy with what has fallen to me in this league through 14 rounds.
Can I just tell you how much I don't like picking right behind you? I'm not a fan of it.
Dude, you killed me in your 11-12 turn. Like, I was going to be happy with either one of the guys that you got there. And yep. I didn't think you were going quarterback, so I really thought that, okay, I'll get Stafford coming back. Like, I can live with that in the 12th. And go from there. And when you picked up Roschon Johnson and Matt Stafford, I don't know. It was somewhere over this weekend. I was around people and I was verbally cussing you out loud. And they're going, "What are you doing?" Like, nothing. Don't worry about it. I'm like,
well, that was my plan all along, was that if those two fell to me there, I was going that route. Like I had those picks locked and loaded there. You got me back in the 13th, though. I was really hoping Israel Abikonda fell to me and got all the way back there.
I'm grabbing him everywhere.
So, which I think is smart, right? Because everybody's talking about Breece Hall being back week 1, yada, yada, yada. We've seen this narrative play out. The only guy really to come back and be as good or better off of an ACL in year 1 off of an ACL is Adrian Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
And if your name isn't all day AP, like, sorry, I'm drafting your backup there because I think that you're going to end up getting slow rolled there a little bit, and especially with the severity of that injury, right? Like, I think they're going to work him back a little bit slower because of how important he is to their long-term plans of that franchise there. So, but yeah, no, the Matt Stafford, the Roschon Johnson there had it been anybody else sitting at Matt Stafford, I wasn't going to go quarterback there, but in this dynasty best ball type of thing there, I was going, man, 4 quarterbacks deep on 12 teams on that one. I've got a mix of some young guys, some old guys. Let's let that one roll. And I've got a pretty solid base there. And I feel pretty good about that. We'll kind of see what falls to me back here when it finally gets back around here. But I'm liking this team that I've assembled so far. Definitely have that mix of old, mix of young, mix of playmakers, mix of just consistent kind of guys there. So really like the way that this is kind of coming to play here. So absolutely enjoying that one. But any other thoughts here? Anything else we need to start kind of hitting up here before we get into the team breakdowns?
Oh, I don't think so. I think we can jump right into these teams and just kind of let the wind go where it takes us.
All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and get hopping right on into it here. And starting off with the Colts tonight. So Indianapolis went 4-12-1 with a 42% pass, 58% run ratio last year. Ranked 31st in points for, 27th in yards for. New head coach, new offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen, the new head coach. Jim Bob Cooter is the offensive coordinator. And we're going to start where we always do, over in the running back room. Jonathan Taylor finished RB 34 last year. 192 rush attempts, 861 yards, 4 touchdowns, 28 receptions, 40 targets, 143 yards, 0 TDs. Thoughts on Jonathan Taylor?
JT had a rough go of it last year, right? I mean, he was basically the unanimous number one coming into the season last year. The slow start out of the gate. Got dinged up kind of early with some nagging injuries. The offensive line was not nearly as efficient as we wanted them to be, and the passing game really struggled with Matt Ryan under center. They just could not keep the safety out of the box, basically. So it is a tough go for him. I do expect him to bounce back. I do think that Jonathan Taylor is a good talent there, but excuse me. Now what you're going to have to deal with is a dual threat quarterback, right? How many of those touches disappear because now your quarterback's tucking and running, and in situations or RPOs where you would typically see the ball, are you not? I still think Taylor's dangerous, right? Like, we've seen him be able to break off these long plays and to make something out of nothing. So maybe maybe the RPO will work for him and actually free things up a little bit, and so that way the linebackers aren't completely cued in on him. But nevertheless, I'm taking him, in super flex formats. He's going kind of back into the second round. I think I would probably be more comfortable. Maybe not. Maybe I am comfortable with that right there. In single quarterback leagues, I do think that he's a guy who sneaks up in the back end of the first round because you don't have all those quarterbacks pushing him down. And I think I'm okay with that realistically. Like, if I'm sitting in that 11-12 spot and either at the end of the first or beginning of second, if I'm landing Jonathan Taylor, I think I'm feeling pretty good about myself there. So I do expect things to bounce back. I think he finishes back inside of, RB 8, 9 area by the time the season's done and over with. It's going to be a testament to the Colts offense of how many trips into the red zone they get. And the touchdowns could be the difference between him being like RB 8, 9, and 10 or RB like 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, last season, missing as much time as he did and was kind of just banged up all along the way, it seemed, kind of all season long. Didn't help out, but definitely had that kind of curse of, number one overall pick, the 101 in drafts. We've seen that kind of year in, year out now, where it's seemingly the guy that drafted the guy you're sitting there drafting 101 just doesn't perform up to expectations there. And they're lofty expectations. I get that. But Jonathan Taylor is a guy that I would expect to bounce back. And this guy that I would expect to see you carry the ball more than 200 plus times, right? I would expect it probably a pretty healthy 250 as far as carries go out of the backfield, probably an additional 40 to 50 targets out of the backfield as well. So I think he's going to get that 300 plus opportunities again, and I think we'll see him bounce back to the point where it will not surprise me to see him as a top 5 finish on RB this season, just due to the volume and due to the workload. The guys that are going to out touch him, maybe Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb will probably be in that kind of realm as well there. Maybe Saquon Barkley, if they can figure out his contract and what the Giants are going to do. But really, outside of those few guys there, I don't think that we're going to see too many other folks really kind of touch the ball and carry the ball as much as what we'll see JT do here. So even with the RPO there, I think that actually does help him out more so because of the fact that with Anthony Richardson, you've got to respect him being able to run the ball. He's got a little bit more electric arm than what we saw Matt Ryan have last year. about the same accuracy anymore. But so it'll be interesting to see there. And I think we'll see a bounce back, and we'll see him with the top 5 finish there. So if I can get a late first round, early second round type of grade and draft capital spent on him, I'll do that. And I'm not going to have too many problems putting old JT on the roster here. So I like it. Alrighty, let's go ahead and any other thoughts on JT or any of the other running backs you want to hit up on this one? I kind of purposely left all the running backs off of talking about, because it's, in my mind, is JT and that's about it. That's one.
If JT's going down, I think it is more running back by committee, right? With Zack Moss and Deion Johnson.
Deion Jackson.
I do think that you kind of see some more of that split work there. At first, we thought Johnson was going to be the guy. Then Zack Moss actually played pretty well with Jonathan Taylor banged up down the stretch. So I think realistically, if you're a person who likes handcuffs, I think Zack Moss is kind of the handcuff that you would want for Jonathan Taylor. If you're playing that way, and if not, then there's really no other need to go after a running back in the Colts backfield.
Yeah, I would agree with that one as well. And these guys are here. And these guys are both guys that you could pick up off the waiver wire if you need to, like down the road. Not a lot of draft capital need to be spent on either one of them. So, all right, let's go ahead and hit up the wide receiver rooms. We'll shift gears here a little bit. Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver 23, 99 receptions, 141 targets, 925 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaged about 8.8 targets per game. Thoughts on Michael Pittman Jr.?
I think that stat is very telling of how the Colts season went. To have 99 receptions and to only have 923, is that what that was, Derek? 923 receiving yards. A lot of short dink and dunk passes, not getting a whole lot of yards after the catch. Now, Michael Pittman is not a Blazer, but he should be better than what those statistics say. With a new quarterback in place, I think we're going to see a downgrade here, right? Like, I think we're going to be something closer to maybe 75 receptions, and we might see something maybe around 800 yards, and the 4 touchdowns might be about right this year again. Like, so they're taking that from RB23, downgrading that. So now he is in wide receiver 3 territory, probably around 32, something like that in this Colts offense, as they kind of try and refigure out their identity and what they're going to be coming into this season. So I like Michael Pittman. Derek, I know that you like him as well. We've had talks about that, but he is not to the scale of a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Like, he is not that guy, that young guy, with the exception of Cooper Kupp there, who's going to kind of just put that team on his back from a wide receiver position. So he's got to be downgraded. And because of that, he's a wide receiver 3. Be mindful of that when you're going and drafting, because I don't have his current ADP right now, but I would venture to say it's above 30. And so buyer beware. I don't know that you're going to be getting your return on him like you want this year.
A lot of places out there have him kind of ranked wide receiver 36 right now, coming off the board, and that sounds about right. And I'd be pretty comfortable taking him as my 3rd wide receiver in that kind of range there with wide receiver 36. Wide receiver 36, I'd put him kind of pick 79. So you're talking 7th round type of deal, which, again, all of that sounds pretty reasonable, and I wouldn't have necessarily a problem doing that. And, there's some hope here for Michael Pittman Jr. from the standpoint when you really dive into some of like his advanced metrics, things like that, right? Like you hit that point up really well. What 99 receptions, didn't even break 1,000 yards to it. With Matt Ryan throwing him the ball, the average depth of target was ridiculously short. So the average depth of target was 6.9 yards on an ADOT to it. His average yards before catch on a reception was 5.7. Like this was back down closer to his rookie year on yards before catch type of thing. But he had a deeper ADOT during his rookie season. Now, if they can get him back to where his average depth of target was in 2021, which there's a chance that we can see that a little bit. Now, the target quality may not necessarily be as good as it was. You've got a young quarterback developing, things like that still needs to find the accuracy side of it. But if they can get him back to an ADOT of around 10 yards, in the high 9s, 10 yards type of thing, like they saw in 2021, there is a chance that we can see him flourish a little bit there as well and get closer to the 1,000-yard mark. But that's really what it's going to come down to is, are they going to be able to set that up enough to get him further down the field, let him use that big body, big frame of his to make a play on the outside? And is the target accuracy going to be there enough? Those are all kind of the questions that have to be answered. I don't know that Indianapolis is going to get into scoring position enough this year that we see him, get up into that 6, 7, 8 touchdown range. I think that it's probably more likely we see him 4 to 5 touchdowns on this one. I think we're probably closer to about 80, call it about 80 receptions on 130 targets and somewhere around about probably about 850 to 900 yards would be where I'd kind of see that one coming and play, which means that I would absolutely love him playing as like a flex type of deal or my wide receiver 3, which again, kind of right where he's going on that one, but not looking to break the bank or spend up on that one at all. Any other thoughts on Michael Pittman Jr.?
No, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. It's the ebbs and flows.
All righty, let's go ahead and hit up Alec Pierce, who was wide receiver 60, 41 receptions, 78 targets, 593 yards, 2 touchdowns, an average of 4.9 targets per game. Thoughts on Alec Pierce?
Kind of the same problem here, right? Like we got to be able to stretch that out. The average depth per target is terrible, right? 4 yards for your Y receiver, your Z, depending on what he was doing, just isn't going to cut it. So I do expect the touchdowns to go up slightly. I expect probably 4 out of him as well. Maybe 700 yards on 60 to 65 receptions this year. So I do think you see a tick up in those receptions, but I think ultimately he is kind of in that maybe that bottom end of wide receiver 4, very top end of wide receiver 5 area. So at this point, you're not starting him maybe on a bye week, or if the matchup's just super juicy, you look at that. But he's a guy that I'm probably avoiding until I understand what the Colts are going to be doing with either Minshew or Anthony Richardson.
Fair enough. And he's coming off the board kind of wide receiver 65 in a lot of cases there, kind of right there in the same realm as John Mechie, Hunter Renfrow, Romeo Doubs, Wan'Dale Robinson. And there's a lot of guys in there that I think I'd rather take a shot on that one, right? Like Romeo Doubs, guy that I'd like to take a shot on, probably over Alec Pierce, both of them in their second year campaign. I'd rather take the upside of a John Mechie that late as far as a best ball, deep threat, blow up type of game there. Alec Pierce, again, like this is one of those that Anthony Richardson's got a good arm, and Alec Pierce is a little bit of a burner that can get on the outside and run there. And I think that's where we'll kind of see him fill in, is kind of in that gunner role as far as the wide receivers kind of go there, with Josh Downs kind of rolling in here to the slot type of receiver there. So I think we'll see him some down. Right. I think we'll see some downfield throws there, but it's going to come down to moon shots and if they connect or not. It means that he's going to have a blow up game and a disappearing act type of game. And I think that's where we really will see his fantasy value play out there, to the point where He will make a really, really good best ball candidate, and I like the DFS side of upshot for him on where that probably is. But season long, he's a guy that I will let out there and let somebody else take that shot on, and I'm willing to be wrong on that one. So, any other thoughts on Alec Pierce?
No, sir.
All right. Josh Downs, the rookie, drafted in the 3rd round, pick 79 out of North Carolina. Thoughts on Josh Downs?
Kind of a Paris Campbell 2.0, right? He's a, I guess, slightly smaller. I think he's 6'2".
He's
5'10".
Yeah, he's a short guy.
Shorty guy. So he's going to be playing in the slot. Again, he might be benefited with Richardson, right? Being closer to the line of scrimmage. That might serve him some extra targets that you wouldn't normally see with a veteran quarterback coming in as a slot receiver. But overall, yeah, I'm going to take a couple random flyers on him in rookie drafts to try and bolster lineups that are hurting on receiver. But I'm not touching him in redraft. It's just not a position, or he is not the type of player I'm going to be looking to go to late in drafts. I think I can find some other avenues, whether it's receiver or running back, that is not Josh Downs in an offense that I don't think is going to pass very much.
Right. He's a guy, again, best ball candidate. Love that type of format for him, but I don't want to play this guessing game with him in season long redraft, which ultimately it's going to be a kind of a rough go, I think, for him in his rookie year and this offense overall there. So he's a guy that when draft day comes and goes, he will not be on many of my rosters there. But I do like the sneaky upside there that the sneaky upside potential, I guess is a better way of saying that he carries in a best ball format type of thing. So I do like that one there. Isaiah McKenzie coming over in the offseason, really kind of slotted in to potentially be that slot receiver there for him. Finished the wide receiver at 53, 42 receptions, 66 targets, 423 yards, 4 touchdowns, average of 4.1 targets per game last season. Thoughts on Isaiah McKenzie?
Those are stats with Josh Allen. So the stats coming into this year, I expect to be cut in half at best. Pass. No, thank you.
Right. Same for me, right? Like this is one of those that I thought that he had some potential coming over, not having to, kind of fill in that same space that we saw Gabe Davis play a lot in Buffalo, and really we'd probably get a chance to kind of see what he did. But them going out and spending day 2 capital on Josh Downs to ultimately play the same type of position, I think that he's going to end up being more of a depth piece for the Colts here. And I don't know that I'm even going to take, I don't even know that I'm going to take a shot on him in a best ball format there. So, all righty, let's go ahead and move on to the tight ends here. Kylen Granson, tight end 42 last year, 31 receptions, 40 targets, 302 yards, 0 touchdowns, average of 3.1 targets per game. Thoughts on Kylen?
Pass. No, I'm not even looking at him. He is not on my big board. He is not on my tight end board. He is not in case of emergency break fire board. Like, I don't have any shares of Kyle Granson. I'm not going to have any shares of him. It is just not somewhere I'm willing to go.
Cosign, and we'll just call it that and move on. Jelani Woods, tight end 32, 25 receptions, 40 targets, 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, average of 3.3 targets per game. Thoughts on Jelani Woods?
This one's interesting for best ball. I don't know that I like it in a redraft league because he's going to go undrafted. You could pick him up off your waiver wire. Maybe if I'm hurting at tight end and just need some youth with Jelani Woods coming into his second season, I'm taking a flyer on him in a dynasty league. But this is a big bodied guy. Like he's like 6'7", massive wingspan. He had, and I don't remember who it was against last year, but he had one game for the Colts where he just showed out and kind of showed everyone what he can do. Again, it might be a little bit different with Richardson, right? Tight end, quarterback's best friend. He plays closer to the line of scrimmage. He could possibly be that security blanket, but Nevertheless, again, not a guy I'm looking for in a redraft league. I think most redraft leagues, he's going to be undrafted completely. So he's another guy I can watch for a week or two and then pick up off the waiver wire. I'm not going to be spending a draft pick to start my season on Jelani Woods.
Yeah, he's a guy that, just like last year, he had a couple of really good finishes out there for people, right? Week 3 versus Kansas City, he was tight end 4 on the week. Week 6 in Jacksonville, he was tight end 10 on the week. And week 12 against Pittsburgh, he was tight end 7 on the week. So he gave you 3 really good kind of weeks and good finish type of weeks for a tight end there. And certainly, did some good things for you. But the rest of the season was a disappearing act where, we had a lot of games where he didn't play, or we had finishes closer to tight end 50. And there was more of those tight end finishes in the 40s than there were closer to single digits. So again, a guy that, yes, I'm kind of right there with you. Best ball has a lot of intrigue for me because then I can take the shot and I can get those upside weeks for not spending much draft capital in a best ball format on a late round guy there. But I don't want to play this guessing game on tight end for redraft here this season coming up, especially with the rookie quarterback. And yes, I get that, tight end best friend, or tight end tends to be the best friend of rookie quarterbacks and young quarterbacks there. But I don't want to take my shot on playing the guessing game on which week that's going to happen in. So like in best ball, outside of that, probably passing. Mo Alley Cox still on the roster there. I'm kind of throwing him in there. Same thing. Like I'd maybe go with a little bit of a best ball flyer on him, but unless you've got some other thoughts on Mo Alley Cox, that's kind of where I'm relegating to as a best ball candidate.
Yeah, again, I'm not expecting a whole lot out of this passing offense, so the tight ends become rather irrelevant in my mind. I'm just not looking at them.
All righty. Let's go ahead and head to the quarterbacks here. Anthony Richardson, drafted first round, pick 4 out of Florida. Thoughts on the rookie QB?
Has the ceiling of a high-profile Cam Newton. And that's kind of what it is. We got to see him develop. We got to see what that looks like. Is Gardner Minshew going to start the first 2-3 weeks of the season until they feel like they have to play him? I know Jim Irsay wants him on the field kind of right away. So we'll see if the ownership kind of wins out in this instance. But nevertheless, I think his ceiling in redraft leagues, if you're playing a 2 QB, I think his ceiling might be 15. I think he's going to get you a couple top end weeks because of his legs. But ultimately, you're looking at a guy who's probably only going to throw for like 130 yards a game. So you get brought back down to earth. If he can manage 15 passing touchdowns, if you can get 15 passing touchdowns and 8 rushing touchdowns, you're probably going to be pretty happy with what you get. But we just got to keep an eye on it. Ball security, accuracy, him being able to make the right decision as far as tuck it and run, throw it away, or get it to a receiver, right? We got to see how fast his progression moves through. So I'm not opposed to taking a flyer on him, especially in a 2-quarterback league, or if you get a really high-end, strong receiver like top 5, and then he falls late in the draft, and that's who you pair up for your single quarterback league as a high ceiling backup for one bye week. I understand, and I kind of sign off on that one there.
Yeah, and this is one of those that I really do think that we could see him have that, almost Justin Fields type of ceiling when it's all said and done there, right? Like, this is a guy that could get 1,000 yards on the ground with his legs, can certainly make some things happen, very athletic, certainly needs some room to develop on the arm side of things, so that could play into some various things there as well. But there's a real chance that we see him score very well due to the legs and manage to get up there towards QB1, but more likely that this is a guy that we see like most rookies, perform closer to QB 20 than he does QB 10. And that's where I think I'd kind of see him ultimately play out there for Superflex. Yep. I'm willing to take that shot as the third quarterback to second quarterback on the roster, but for single QB, no, I'm gonna pass on that one and let somebody else deal with that, because there's a good chance I can probably pick him up off the waiver partway through the season in a single QB league and just kind of roll the dice on that one there a little bit. Any other thoughts on Anthony Richardson or the Colts?
No, I mean, it's a rebuilding project, but they're in the right division to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville isn't so far out in front of everybody else that it's done and said, but the Colts are definitely, number 3 in that division. Possibly number 4 with everything that Houston did, and they're trying to make up some ground quick and in a hurry.
Right. Kind of crazy to think about if all those quarterbacks that just got drafted, a couple days ago, if they all pan out, that could be a very QB laden division here very, very, very quickly. Right. And for many years to come there. So very interesting to see, and we'll be rooting on those young guys there and see how they pan out. All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to the Denver Broncos, who finished 5-12 last year, 56% pass, 44% run, ranked 32nd in points for, 21st in yards for. Coaching change happened with Sean Payton, the new head coach, Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator. We're going to head right into the running back room, start over there where we always do. Javonte Williams ended up finished RB 84, 47 rush attempts, 204 yards, 0 touchdowns, 16 receptions, 22 targets on 76 yards, 0 TDs. Thoughts on Javonte Williams?
He's one of those guys that you need to be paying attention to the injury updates that keep coming out. I think that there's a better than likely shot that he starts the season on the PUP list, and because of that, his season totals are going to be skewed. Now, we're seeing his draft stock fall, right? Like we are seeing that being reflected. But it is something just to be mindful of. And when he does come back, I don't know, much like Derek was saying earlier with Breece Hall, because of the type of injury, it's really unfortunate because Javonte Williams was one of those guys. He was fighting on every tackle. He was always falling forward. He was uber aggressive. And then, freak injury happened and really, really tore up his knee, guys. It's a lot worse than I think what everyone originally anticipated. So it's going to take some more time for him to come back. That being said, you're going to end up having to draft him as kind of your third running back and then hope that he recovers. But if you're willing to take that gamble on him as your third running back, you do have to surround him with some other pieces in that room for depth, because there's no guarantee that you're going to love what you see when he comes back, which is really unfortunate because I really like the player. But when everything's all said and done with, I mean, if we have to call out a number, I'd tell you RB 45, but that's because I think he's going to miss about half the season.
Yeah, I think you're probably about spot on. He's coming off the board kind of at running back 35 right now, and that kind of puts him, like you were talking about, you'd have to draft him as your third running back on your roster. I don't know that I want to spend a draft capital in that range to do that. You've got some other kind of running backs in that range. Tyler Algier, Damian Harris, Elijah Mitchell, Alexander Madison, Donta Foreman. Kind of all of those guys. I wouldn't necessarily mind taking the shot on any one of those guys over Javonte Williams this season. Samaje Perine is a guy that I think is really kind of the sneaky play here in a lot of running back type of rooms. And we'll talk about him in a minute, but he's going about 9 spots after, at least as far as running back goes, is going about 9 running backs later than what you are seeing Javonte go. And so I'd rather take my shot on a different Denver running back than Javonte Williams. Again, right there with you. Love the talent, love the way that love the way that he plays and how he shows up on the field week in, week out. But this is one that this year I am going to be out on the Javonte Williams train, so to speak. Like that's just one of those that unless he falls to me way late into a draft to the point where I'm putting him on as a 5th or 6th running back, that would be about the point where I'd sign off and say, okay, let's take this shot, because I'm throwing darts anyway at this, and I might as well take a guy that's been hyper competitive and ultra productive when he's been out there and been healthy. So that's kind of my thoughts on Javonte. Any other thoughts there?
No, I think if you're, depending on your league format, right? Keeper league, like our home league, if it's a round penalty, I think you need to be very cautious about where that round penalty is. But there is no way I'm keeping him in, if you keep 2 guys, that's your first 2 rounds worth of picks. There's not a chance he's a guy I'm taking in that position. So I'd be looking elsewhere, and then if I want him that bad, I turn around and pick him up later in the draft. So really unfortunate. He's a hell of a player, and hopefully his recovery is very fast and extremely efficient, because he is obviously part of our hometown team, and I would love to see him back out on the field sooner rather than later.
Cosign. Alrighty, Samaje Perine finished running back 37 last year, 95 rush attempts, 394 yards, 2 touchdowns, 38 receptions, 51 targets, 287 yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air. Thoughts on Samaje Perine?
I think you've seen him with about 150 touches this year. Maybe upwards of 160, 165, depending on how much passing work he gets. I think he's a great steal in the draft right now. From where he's going to the early season usage that you're going to get out of him, the first 6 weeks of the season are going to dang near pay for him itself. So I like Perine. I like what he does. He did a good job there in Cincinnati. And now he gets to come into a role in Denver where he is most likely going to be the starter with the aforementioned Javonte Williams going on the PUP list. So it's his chance to kind of show his skill set, really run the backfield there for a little while in Denver. But I think it pays off, and I think he can be a very good fantasy stash for you and then return dividends right away.
Absolutely. And the crazy thing to think about is the fact that Samaje Perine is the record holder in the FBS when it comes to most rushing yards in a single game. Yet where he's typically been used in the NFL is as a pass catching specialist type of role. And some of that has to do with the fact that he is really, really good at pass pro. He's also got really soft hands coming out the backfield there. And I'm really excited to see what he does in a Sean Payton system. This is a system that tends to get running backs out of the backfield a little bit, put the ball in their hands in space. And I think that this is a guy that can certainly do some really amazing things once you give him the ball and let him work a little bit down the field. And where he's coming off the board now is kind of in that 10th, 11th round, RB 43, 44 off the board. Really like the draft capital there. So he's a guy that I'm not going to lie, I might actually reach a little bit in some of these various leagues to put on my roster and go that route. Like I wouldn't have a problem drafting him in round 9 if he's got kind of a 10th round ADP. Really, really like what the potential talent and what the upside is on Samaje Perine there. So, all right, let's go ahead and head on over into the wide receiver room. Jerry Jeudy finished as wide receiver 21, 67 receptions, 100 targets, 972 yards, 6 touchdowns, and averages 6.7 targets per game. Thoughts on Jerry Jeudy?
I think Judy's going to have a really big year, or at least a bigger year. So I expect him to creep up. I don't know if he lands in that wide receiver 1 territory, Derek, but I do think he's closer to that fringe wide receiver 1 territory. So maybe somewhere 16 or above, right? So he's going to climb 5 or 6 spots is kind of where I think that is. And I think a large part of it is just due to the offense. Like Jeudy is the young guy. He is the one who probably has the most speed on him. He's not going to have to play in the slot. So I think some of that's good and some of that's bad. There's a really good argument for saying that he plays better out of the slot if he would just open himself up to that skill set and that usage. He's not quite embraced it the way I think a lot of Denver fans wanted him to yet, but nevertheless, I like Jeudy. I like him because you can still pick him up as like a top end wide receiver 3, right, when you're drafting, and being able to do some different things and have a fun lineup with Jerry Jeudy in it with some real firepower ahead of him if you choose to format your roster going receiver heavy right away.
Yeah, I mean, where he's coming off the board is kind of that wide receiver 23, kind of an early 5th round type of pick there. And that sounds about right to me. There's a lot of guys kind of in that same ballpark that I would be willing to take the shot on him over some of these other guys, right? Like Terry McLaurin. I think I'd rather take the shot on Jerry Jeudy over Scary Terry this year, just from the standpoint of I think I'm a bigger believer in the bounce back of Russ than I am of this, the transcendence of Sam Howell. Christian Watson, right? Like he's a guy going before Jerry Jeudy. I think I'd rather do that. Christian Watson had an outlier when it came to touchdown percentage, as far as what he was able to do there. Keenan Allen, a guy too that, has seemingly he kind of started to be on the decline there a little bit. All 3 of these guys going right before but right before Jerry Jeudy. I think I'd rather take the shot on Jerry Jeudy on that one there and just see how that one kind of comes to play. But I think you're right? I think that is very easy I think we'll see a very easy kind of wide receiver 2 finish for him. I don't think that we see him get up into wide receiver 1 there, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me to see him outperform wide receiver 23 and get up in there even at wide receiver 17, 18, and he's still recurring draft capital and draft value for you at that point. So I think that he is worth a pickup, and it should be a good addition for your roster. Courtland Sutton finished wide receiver 43 last year, 64 receptions, 109 targets, 829 yards, 2 touchdowns, average of 7.3 targets per game. Thoughts on Courtland Sutton?
Sutton's a guy who probably you feel like underperformed a little bit last year, right? Now, part of it was the offense, only 2 touchdowns. I think you typically expect Sutton to be in the end zone 5 or 6 times, which inevitably kind of catapults him up into that wide receiver 3 territory. And I do think that's probably where he finishes, somewhere between, 31 and 35 is kind of where I see him landing. So a little bit of improvement. You gain some touchdowns, but I do think you lose a little bit of the volume with Tim Patrick being back and how Sean Payton, I think, is going to kind of run this offense through the running game, and then really feature Jerry Jeudy as that true alpha this year.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look at kind of where he's coming off the board right now, right? Like wide receiver 45 in a lot of cases. I think that we will see him outperform that, so he'll return some value on that one. But it's kind of interesting to see some of the guys coming off in similar fashion to him right now, and there's a lot of guys that I would take Courtland Sutton over in that one, right? Like Quentin Johnson coming off the board at 40, Rashad Bateman 41. I would take Courtland Sutton over either one of those guys. I think, right? Marquise Hollywood Brown. If Kyler's the quarterback season long, sure, I'm going to go with Marquise Hollywood Brown over Courtland Sutton. If not, I'll probably go with Courtland Sutton on that one. Deontay Johnson, that's another guy that is going to see enough volume his way to most likely get up into, fringe wide receiver 2 territory there as well. So Zay Flowers, Brandon Cooks, Jacoby Myers, all kind of going right in that similar range as Courtland Sutton. And I think I'd rather have Courtland Sutton over all 3 of those guys as well. So I'd take the upside of a Courtland Sutton over a lot of the wide receivers going in his draft position there. So any other thoughts there?
No, I like it, and I agree. I'm taking Sutton over, I think, all those guys that you just listed.
Okay. All righty. Let's go ahead and hit up Tim Patrick, who did not play last year, right? He's coming off of an injury, And thoughts on Tim Patrick?
I could easily see Tim Patrick being Russell Wilson's favorite target. Like, he's the dirty work receiver, right? He does the grimy. He likes the high point balls. He does do a good job at it, but he's not afraid to go over the middle. We saw him fall into the end zone a little bit more back in, I guess, 2021, right? And right before he got that big contract in the offseason. So I think he has something to prove with being out last year. I like Tim Patrick late because I think that there's a possibility that he is going to outperform Courtland Sutton in a lot of different ways. So if you have an option and you're pivoting away from Courtland Sutton, that's perfectly fine, because then you can turn around and pivot towards Tim Patrick a few rounds later. And I think you're going to see about the same, if not maybe a better return.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Patrick is kind of the forgotten wide receiver in Denver in a lot of cases there. And it happens, especially in fantasy, when you don't play, things like that. And you weren't necessarily a big name guy out there. But kind of where he's going, he's coming off the board as kind of wide receiver 80 in a lot of cases there. And he's a guy that it would take over just about everybody else in that kind of tier. And I'm just going to kind of run through it. Tell me when we get to a name that you would take over Tim Patrick here. But Josh Palmer, Chase Claypool, Mecole Hardman, Darius Slayton, MVS, Allen Robinson, Isaiah Hodgkins, Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, Josh Downs, Van Jefferson, Corey Davis, Russell Gage, Paris Campbell, Robert Woods, Terrence Marshall, Sterling Shepard. Any of those guys, would you take over Tim Patrick?
Man.
And I might take a shot on a couple of these guys.
Maybe a shot, but if you're looking for just performance, I think Patrick has the best and clearest path to be the second leading receiver on his team than any of those guys you just listed, who are most likely all clear third options, right, or fourth options.
Yeah. And that's just kind of when you start going through some of that. Yeah, there's not many of these guys that I would put ahead of Tim Patrick, and I'll take the shot deep and a dart throw deep on that one because I think you're going to get a lot of serviceable games out of him, and he'll return fantasy value for you on that one there. They've got a bunch of other kind of wide receivers out there. Do we want to talk about any of these guys, such as KJ Hamler, Marvin Mims, Marquez Callaway?
So Callaway's interesting only because he's so familiar with the offense. Like, I think he gives at least he gives Sean Payton the ability to kind of jumpstart things. Mims is going to be returning punts, and I think he's going to be your slot guy for the most part, right? KJ Hamler's down, Torres Peck. Like, I don't think he's coming back this season. So Hamler's gone. I mean, and he's probably gone off the Broncos. I don't see them keeping him around for another year. Then you have little Jordan Humphrey. I believe he came over too.
He did.
He's another guy who's going to be fighting for special teams reps, just because you need guys and speed guys on special teams, but Jeudy and Sutton aren't playing special teams. With the money you paid Tim Patrick, do you really want him playing special teams, right? Like, so there's your top three guys. None of them are doing it. So if Mims is returning punts, that's great, but that means he's not a gunner or anything like that. And you got to have a little bit more depth there for your special teams play. But I do think that Sean Payton will get that figured out pretty well. Like, I do think he has a goal of how to be better and more diligent on special teams to help create maybe some smaller field positioning for Russell Wilson, and not so many of the bonehead mistakes that cost you that extra 10, 15, 25 yards that you were seeing from the Broncos here the past couple seasons.
I like it. Greg Dulcich, tight end 30 last year, 33 receptions, 55 targets, 411 yards, 2 touchdowns, an average of 5.5 targets per game. Thoughts on Greg Dulcich?
I like him. I think he's on the upswing. I think we need to see him healthy. But I do like what his ability is there for the Broncos to be that pass catching tight end for them. So I think he is, if he can stay healthy, I think he's a borderline top 15 tight end. You're going to see flashes. I think there's going to be best ball weeks where he finishes top 2, top 3, and you're really loving it. But I do think there's still going to be some weeks where Russ kind of forgets about him if he's not falling in the end zone and he has 2 catches for, 27 yards and you're going, what the hell?
Right. And, top 15, that's kind of where he's coming off the board at right now at tight end 14. Really kind of like that spot for him. And this is a guy that is kind of one of those targets that I wouldn't mind taking a shot on, as that kind of deep or that late tight end target to it. He's coming off the board 125 overall. So you're talking kind of in that 11th round. So willing to definitely shoot my shot on that one and play that late tight end game and kind of, work through the roulette there a little bit when it comes to Dulcich there. And I think you're right. I think he'll definitely have some big blow up weeks and have some weeks that you definitely kind of forget about. But that is the case if you're a tight end, and typically you're not named Travis Kelce and to some extent Mark Andrews. Outside of those 2 guys, that is a very inconsistent position overall there. Any desire to talk about Albert Okwuegbunam or Adam Trautman at the tight end position for the Broncos?
Trautman's going to be your blocking tight end. He's the one who's most familiar with the system. Okwuegbunam, I think Sean Payton can work with him and have him become a little bit better blocker, but realistically, he's going to be I think he's going to be another pass catching option there for Russell Wilson when Dulcich needs a quick breather.
Fair enough. Let's head on over to the quarterback room. Russell Wilson, QB 16, last season, 292 completions, 483 attempts, a 60.5 completion percentage, 3,524 yards through the air, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 55 rushes for 277 and three TDs on the ground. Thoughts on letting Russ cook?
Well, I think Russ had a terrible year last year, and he still finished quarterback 16. Like, if you're a fantasy fan, that's a good thing. Broncos fans, I don't know that we'd ever believe it if we weren't looking at those numbers. But I think through Sean Payton, all things get better. And so it wouldn't surprise me if Russ had 24 passing touchdowns next season. And maybe he still has the 3 rushing touchdowns. But as a Broncos fan, if I were to tell you Russ is going to throw for 3,900 yards, pass for 25 touchdowns, and run in 3 more, so a total of 28, you probably take that and say, okay, that's improvement. Like, that's more along the lines of what we were expecting. I don't think anyone thinks he's going to go out and throw for 35 plus, right? Like, I think that's completely unrealistic, but I do think that neighborhood of 25, or if he, they get in a good groove and they're a little bit more efficient in the red zone, maybe inch closer to 30, like 30 total touchdowns maybe. And I think we'd be pretty happy with that as Broncos fans.
Yeah, we certainly would be. And last year was by just about every measurable statistic the worst season of Russ's career. Even going back to like a rookie season, things like that. Like, he was just straight bad and not at all what you drafted, because you drafted him as a top 10 quarterback last season and certainly didn't pay off on that one. And really it really took Nathaniel Hackett no longer being in the picture for you to start kind of getting glimpses of what Russ might have been and what you thought Russ could have been really over the last few kind of weeks of the season there when he was no longer under the tutelage of Nathaniel Hackett. But regardless, I think that we do see an upswing here. We certainly probably see the completion percentage go up there We probably see a little bit better on the touchdown percentage go up there. I think the rushing work probably stays about the same to it. So I think we'll see a statistical greater than output this year. And we'll probably see Russ sneak back into fringe QB1, probably somewhere in that QB 10 to 12 range, I would imagine there. So where he's coming off the board, he's going to be a value for some folks out there because of that, recency bias and that just that awful season that he put up last season. Shoot, when you look at that here, let's just pull that up here. Russ Wilson coming off the board is QB 17. I think that he'll easily outperform where you're going to draft him at that one. So I would take the shot on that one. Alrighty, let's head on. Any other thoughts on Russ or the Bronx?
No. I refuse to get too optimistic about this team this year, so we're going to see what happens.
All right, let's go ahead and head on over to the Rams. The Rams finished 5-12, 60% pass, 40% run. They were ranked 27th in points for, 32nd in yards for. The head coach, Sean McVay, offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur. And we're going to head right into the running back room where we always start. Cam Akers finished running back 33, 188 rush attempts, 786 yards, 7 touchdowns, 13 receptions on 18 targets, and 117 yards through the air. Thoughts on Cam Akers?
Cam Akers was a very interesting story last year, right? Like drafted really high, didn't do anything the first half of the season. And then the back half of the season, honestly, guys, if you had him on your lineup for the end of the regular season going into the playoffs for fantasy, he arguably won your league for you with what he was doing in that Christmas Day game against the Broncos or whatever. It's still one that I have nightmares about. But the thing about Cam Akers is there's no real competition for workload in that backfield at the moment. So I like Cam Akers because of that reason. I think he has the ability to finish as a top 15 back, and you were getting him stupid late because people are completely disinterested with him and what they got out of him last year. So I think he's an immediate value personally, and I'm grabbing quite a bit of Cam Akers where I can get my hands on him because I think it's all built-in value with where you're getting him to where he's going to finish.
I mean, right now he's coming off the board running back 20, kind of in that 40th overall. So you're talking early 4th round. And yeah, having this guy as an RB2 on my roster, I'd feel pretty good about that one because like you said, there's not much competition for him.
But even better is a 3, right? Like,
right?
I mean, if you're getting him later on and there's a run on receiver or something like that and you're looking for a good pivot, this is a really good 4th, 5th round pivot.
Absolutely. Like this is Miles Sanders going to pick right ahead of him. I think I'd probably rather go the Cam Akers route. Aaron Jones going ahead of him, Dalvin Cook going ahead of him, J.K. Dobbins. I can make arguments that he'll outperform all 4 of those guys. So definitely a little bit of some value on this one there, especially if he slides a little bit. And I think that we will see him kind of slide down once the redraft really kind of kicks in and we start getting some heavy ADP action on this one. So I think he'll be some value on this one. And this is one too, right? Like we always tell guys to look for guys heading into contract years. This is a contract year for Cam Akers. So there is no reason that the Rams, one, I don't think the Rams are planning on signing him again. So I could see them just putting the full workload on him and kind of running him into the ground. And that being their plan for Cam Akers. So I'll take the workload. I'll take that. I think that we get some good value returned on that draft pick there. Heading on into Kyren Williams, and Kyren Williams, I gotta yell at the guy that does these graphics. I tell you what, 27 rush attempts, 60 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 receptions, 5 targets, 21 yards, 0 targets through the air in an injury-shortened season. Thoughts on Kyren Williams?
He's a guy that I'll probably keep an eye on going into camp. Sitting today, I'm not drafting him. Like today, I'm leaving him alone. Maybe if it's a deep startup, I might take a look. But I think in most cases where you're only drafting 15 players, he is not going to be one of the 15 on my roster. So I'll keep tabs on him just to make sure that he's going to be fully healthy. Or if we need to pivot off to Evans, the rookie that they drafted or signed, and kind of look at that angle. But immediately, I don't think he poses any threat to what Cam Akers is doing, because Sean McVay is one of the few coaches who, when he finds a running back that he likes, he will ride them till they're dead.
Yeah, this is a guy that coming off the board, kind of running back 77. He's not a guy that you should be drafting, outside of incredibly deep leagues here. But he's a guy that I will be adding to a watch list there and see how they kind of progress throughout that thing. It's certainly worth keeping an eye on. He certainly kind of made some rumblings through some reports last year, things like that, of how big they were on this kid. And he could be a guy that sees a fair bit of receiving work out of the backfield there. But again, not going to necessarily spend much draft capital on him.
Couldn't check it down, though. That's the problem.
That's also very true. So we'll see how this one progresses. But yeah, I'm not necessarily looking to spend draft capital on him. Put him on the watch list. We'll see how that thing shakes out there. Zach Evans, the rookie, they drafted 6th round, pick 215 out of Ole Miss. Thoughts on Zach Evans?
He's actually a guy that I've been looking at quite a bit later in drafts, just to have kind of that depth piece. I've picked him up a good deal in late round startups or dynasty rookie drafts, just kind of looking towards the future and what McVay does. So I don't expect a massive workload or total from him in redraft this year, but he's a guy that I definitely have flagged, so that way I can kind of monitor that situation and grab him maybe a week before the real breakout comes, if he's going to start seeing the field in the NFL.
Yeah, this is a guy, again, that's coming off the board, running back 73 right now. Again, this is a guy that we're not going to necessarily see drafted much. So kind of right there with you. Add him to a watch list. We'll see how this thing shakes out there and plays out there, but not looking to actively go out and put Zach Evans on my redraft roster here. Let's go ahead and head on over into the wide receiver room. We got Cooper Kupp, who finished wide receiver 47 last year, 75 targets, 75 receptions, 98 targets, 812 yards, 6 touchdowns, average of 10.9 targets per game in an injury-shortened season. Thoughts on Cooper Kupp?
As long as him and Matt Stafford are paired up, I think Cooper Kupp's a top 3 to 4 option in the NFL. Matt Stafford looks for him early and often. Allen Robinson leaving. They don't have a real true number 2 as much as we'd like to believe in Van Jefferson or in anybody else, Ben Skronsky behind them. So it is a Cooper Kupp show. So I like him. I have no problem taking him as my first receiver off the board. It's him and Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Those are the top 3. And then it is maybe a slight tier break, and then like Tyreek Hill, or you could add Tyreek Hill into that top 1 and do 4. And then, but outside of those top 4, I feel like there's a pretty significant break to everybody else.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? Like I've got him kind of in that top 3, him and Matthew Stafford. The connection's real. Stafford looks to him early, often, all the time, really, and will force the ball into Cooper Kupp if he has to. That is one of the true connections out there that just really real. So Cooper Kupp's a guy that I would be very happy putting him on my roster as my first wide receiver on this one. He'll get the volume. The Rams offense tends to score enough points that we'll see him get the touchdown numbers. We'll see him get the yardage total on this one. Yes, all the way around. Sign me up. Click yes. I wouldn't even necessarily mind spending a late first round pick to an early second round pick on this guy and really just get the standout wide receiver 1 on my roster and just be done with that position. And I can look at adding the depth and my wide receiver 2 in about another 3 or 4 rounds there. So that's kind of how I see that one. Moving on, you said it, the name Van Jefferson, wide receiver 89 last year, 24 receptions, 44 targets, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns, average of 4.4 targets per game. Thoughts on Van Jefferson?
He's still sitting on a bunch of my dynasty teams, but this is kind of the make or break season for me. Like if he doesn't show out and kind of emerge as that true number 2 option in this McVay offense, I'm going to be officially done with Van Jefferson. So, I guess not that it's a hot take, but that's my notice out to all fantasy players that we're going to give this one more shot and see how he can do being the number 2, because we've seen that this McVay offense can hold 2 top 15 quarterbacks. So there's some value or potential value in Van Jefferson, but we haven't seen it yet. So I'm a little weary about it. I'm giving him one more year in the dynasty circuit, and then he's getting dropped from dang near all my rosters.
Yeah, and redraft is one of those that I'm not looking to put him on any of my teams through the draft. Wide receiver 84 off the board, well into the 200s as far as most draft capital there. So he'll be on the waiver wire in most leagues to start the season. And I think that's where he probably should be, but worth a flag, worth a watch on that one to see how the season comes out and how the Rams are going to utilize this offense. And there's a chance that we see them do that because, Allen Robinson had a lot of kind of targets forced his way early on in the season last year. Cooper Kupp definitely saw his. We saw Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, the year before that definitely show up and show out there. So there's a chance that we can see that this could finally be the breakout season for Van Jefferson, but I'm not looking to draft it on that one. I'm willing to put a flag on that one and watch and see how it rolls out there. Ben Skoranek, wide receiver 91, 39 receptions, 61 targets, 376 yards, 0 touchdowns, average of 4.4 targets per game. Thoughts on Skoranek?
He's another guy who I have on a lot of dynasty leagues. I picked him up as he was kind of flashing last year. So I'm doing kind of the same thing with Jefferson. I'm holding on to it. I'm going to see what this usage is like. But for all intents and purposes, you don't need to draft him in a redraft league, right? You can pick him up off the waiver wire pile. But we'll keep you updated as we get news through camp and through redraft season and everything else of kind of where this is shaking out. But today in May, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to let him hit the free agent portal, and I will worry about picking him up. And if I need to spend $1 in fab, I will.
Right. And that's really probably the way to do that. Like in most cases, he's going to fly under the radar for most folks, rightfully so, right, on a team that he's going to be the wide receiver 3. And I think that when it's all said and done, he'll probably be the 4th or 5th most targeted guy on the Rams at the end of the season. Yeah, this is one of those that you're going to let him slide through there, maybe keep an eye on him and see how that emerges. Had a couple of decent games last year where he flashed for fantasy, but that was it. Is going to be a little bit of some flashing here and there. And outside of that, don't spend the draft capital there. Tutu Atwell. Any desire to talk about Tutu Atwell? All right, moving along. Tight end room, Tyler Higbee, who finished tight end 9, 72 receptions, 108 targets, 620 yards, 4 touchdowns, 6.8 targets per game. Thoughts on Tyler Higbee?
I think these numbers look about right. Like I think he's a top 10, top 12 type tight end, but you're not going to see that weekly production, right? It's not Travis Kelce. So even with him being a tight end 1, you're going to be playing matchups a little bit. You're not just going to only carry one tight end on your roster. You're hoping to pair him up with someone, Chiggy Okongwe out of Tennessee. Like you want to pair him up with something like that, right, where you can play different matchups and see how that looks. But I like Higbee. I've had him and do have him on a number of different rosters, and he did well. But we're always looking for better.
Right. Higbee's the guy that I really like as a late round tight end. Like the late tight end dart throw on that one. Coming off the board is tight end 20 in a lot of cases, 155 overall. So you're talking well into the 13th round. Like love the value that you can get for him there. And he should definitely outperform where he's being drafted at right now. And so I really like that one. And he's a guy that I think when it's all said and done will be the second most targeted guy on the Rams this season. So I'm going to take that and just run all the way to the draft capital bank with that one. So let's go ahead and move on into the quarterback room here. Matthew Stafford finished QB 32 in an injury shortened season. 206 completions, 303 attempts, 68% completion percentage, 2,087 yards, 10 TDs, 8 interceptions, 13 rush attempts, 9 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. Thoughts on Matthew Stafford?
The turnovers were a little high last year for me in the ratio, but injury shortened season. He's a guy who's getting 0 love in redraft leagues right now. So if you're looking for a second quarterback or in a super flex league, a third quarterback, Stafford's a great guy to target late because everyone is assuming that he is done and over with and never playing again. That's not the case. He's going to play this year, and I think he's going to be fairly efficient. I think he'll be, quarterback 15, 16, 17, something like that. But it's a great use for a bye-week fill-in.
It honestly wouldn't surprise me to see him sneak up into QB, like back end QB1, fringe QB1 territory, right? Like, not going to surprise me if we look up at the end of the season and we see him, finishing at QB 10, QB 11, 12, like really wouldn't surprise me. He's got the offensive mind around him to put him in a position to do that. Now, that being said, I love the value on that one because he's coming off the board QB like 19 in most cases there. And I think he will outperform that draft capital. And so much so to the point where you in a best ball dynasty startup, you can put him on as your fourth quarterback. And you got to love that type of scenario, that type of situation. And I think that Matthew Stafford will absolutely outperform draft capital this season, and really, really like him as a super flex QB2, potentially QB3 even.
Yeah, I think my only hesitation with putting him in the top 12 is I'm not convinced he's going to play every game this year. And I do think that as we saw with Jalen Hurts, right, like that matters. You missing 1 or 2 of those games, and that's kind of where it drops him down from 12 to 16, something like that, because I think that there's a good chance as they're rebuilding this franchise, he gets dinged up or his back flares up, something like that, and while he will try and play through it and fight through that, I think you could see him go down for a game or 2 just to make sure that he's healthy.
Yeah, and that is a very real possibility, right? It happens.
That's why it works so well for best ball, right? It doesn't matter those weeks that he goes down. Exactly,
right? Like, and if you got him as a QB4 to best ball, shoot, even better. I'm really liking that pick. I'm not gonna lie. So, you're welcome. So, any other thoughts here on Matthew Stafford or the Rams?
No, I mean we gotta see the reemergence of this team, right? Who can really try and unseat the 49ers right now? The Seahawks are going to do their best right now. I think the Rams are probably the 3rd best team in that division, with the Cardinals being 4th. So they're definitely trying to claw their way back up and be competitive in a division that's very tough. It is a very gritty and grimy type division with Seattle and San Francisco leading the way.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. So it'll be interesting to see how this one looks and plays and ultimately comes to fruition here. And it should be a lot of fun to watch these teams along the way. Some pretty good fantasy assets along the teams that we've covered tonight. So it'll be very interesting to see how those ones all shake out there and play out there. But unless you've got anything else that you want to hit up, I think we're going to call it a night.
No, I'm good, right? We're middle of May. We got 6 teams down. We got lots more to go.
Right.
So, I mean, 24, but still we got, 26 teams to go. So, it's all good. We're going to do these breakdowns up until basically fantasy draft season. So this is what the summer is going to look like. Tune in, like, subscribe. Thank you. We appreciate the feedback and the questions that you guys are sending us. So as always, hit us up at Good Old Boys FF on every social media platform and device that you have. And until next week.
Absolutely. He's already said it once, at Good Old Boys FF. Make sure that you're hitting that up across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Hit, all those good places there. We got tons of content coming out for you. And the individual player breakdowns, right? Like, I know that when we start getting into these things and we start getting closer to redraft, it's, hey, what did the boys say about this particular guy? Don't you worry. We're in the process right now of getting all of those cut up and those player profile videos done for you. And those will be released on the YouTube. So head over there, click that subscribe button, youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Click that subscribe button, ring that bell, get those notifications when we go live and when we release those videos for you. And that's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe, y'all. Toodaloos.